Hi, I'm John Bullock, a professor at Towson University in political science.
Okay. We're here today to discuss the Vacants to Values initiative in Baltimore. Could you explain for a few moments why they're doing that program, why it's beneficial for the city?
Right, so the city of Baltimore has an issue with vacant housing. I mean, over time, we've lost from its high point of 950,000 residents down to about 600,000 now. So we've lost over 300,000 residents. So obviously, there's a whole lot of abandoned housing stock in the city. And so now this is one of a series of programs that have been proposed in order to deal with this glut of abandoned housing in the city.
Um, so the city has chosen about 4,000 of the 16,000 vacant homes to try to sell and rehabilitate in one way or another. Why are those homes chosen in the areas that they're chosen? They're in very concentrated areas. Why?
Mhm.
Why are those better than other areas?
Well, it goes back to this concept or the triage concept when we look at urban neighborhoods. You know, those neighborhoods that are, if you make it similar to a battlefield, those that are mortally wounded that, are going to die and they're kind of left to die. There are some areas that are healthy, and so they don't need much help. And then there are those that are on the margins that with a serious infusion of assistance, they could actually become healthy. And so that it seems that the areas they're choosing are those areas that um, they're challenged, but they still have some upside to them. So they might have proximity to potential development sites. They may be closer to certain healthy neighborhoods. So it seems like those are the areas where they're really focusing on. So not necessarily the areas where you have entire blocks of vacant housing, but when you have vacant housing that's at least in an area that is semi healthy.
So what are some of the negative aspects? Obviously, there are people that still live in some of the unhealthy areas. There are people who need to be displaced. There are people in the areas that are being rehabilitated that are affected negatively. What are some of those effects?
Well, one, I mean, some would say that there are some neighborhoods that are just being abandoned. They're just being left to die, as opposed to being assisted. And so you do have those areas that have, not seen any sort of assistance in quite some time, and it's quite unlikely that they will receive assistance. So there are just those areas where that effect will continue to fan out. Those areas become, or they continue to be less desirable. So they're not going to see much of an improvement. Although some of these areas that will at least be slated for the value program, at least they'll have some sort of there'll always be some sort of focus or attention toward those areas. So when you look at areas that are largely vacant, even though there are people who live there, those people who live in those largely vacant areas, they have limited services. We're really talking about street cleaning. They live in proximity to abandoned housing, and so with all the issues in terms of rodents and vermin, but also of crime. And so if you happen to live in one of those communities that is close to or has a large degree of abandoned housing, then you're likely to be living in a dangerous and violent environment.